very, very fast. In fact, there are still countries which are struggling with the problems created by the economic crisis. I think we can now say that all the parameters indicate that we have got out of that problem. So it is in this context that I speak today, and I am going to only talk about certain things that I gained out of my experience. And my experience, as you all know, is the experience of an administrator. It is not an academic experience. It's not an expert experience. It is that of an administrator. And I think even from Kerala's point of view, whatever it has achieved is primarily because of pragmatic administration during the last few years. Now, I think the first point that you see starts right at the beginning. When you are setting up a public sector undertakings, are we really looking into the economic factors that are relevant? Is it set up taking economic considerations into account? Of course, there could be SPVs in the public sector which are determined by social considerations. If governments, as I said, the public sector depends to a great extent on the kind of strategies that are followed by government, and if government feels that for a particular social consideration an SPV is required, it is absolutely up to the government to decide to set up such an SPV. But in such cases, I think we have to be very clear in our minds that you cannot expect a public sector undertaking which is not being set up for economic considerations to perform in the same manner. And if it is going to make losses, we must know what are the losses. The decision maker needs to know what kind of revenue deficits the public sector undertaking is going to run into as initial. And I think budget provisions have to be made right from the start. We should never delude ourselves that we can first set up an undertaking which is ab initio unviable and then expect it to make money. And we need to look at various economic factors. We need to look at the availability of raw materials. We need to look at market potential, market share, and quality, and dimensions of competition, proximity to markets, comparative costs. And one more important thing is that all these factors, you need to look ahead. It cannot be based entirely on what is the situation currently. You need to look a little bit ahead. And you have to analyze within the overall global and national context, which means that the setting up of any public sector undertaking would require sensitivity analysis and risk analysis to be made available to the decision makers so that they go into that decision with all the facts that they come up. It would even be useful to have a third-party evaluation. I think it's always better to take enough time at the initial stage and analyze carefully and present all options before decision makers. Then once you have decided to set up a company, then it's a question of running the company. Here again, I think a distinction has to be drawn between the government and the management. I think sometimes we tend to confuse it a little bit. I don't think we can ever get away from the notion, and we must not get away from the notion, that government is the owner of the enterprise. As the owner of the enterprise, the government does have certain rights to lay down particular strategies, particular policies. Now you cannot say that government will set up an enterprise and then government will not play any further role in its running. I think it is most unrealistic to think that such kind of a dichotomy ever be achieved. At the same time, it is necessary, if you want the company to achieve a particular objective, that there is sufficient autonomy in management. And I think this is the kind of balance that we have to very carefully work out in the running of the enterprise. The appointment of independent shareholders plays a major role in this. And I have always found it useful if public sector companies are able to list their shares, even if it is a small proportion of the shares, in the stock exchanges, so that you know what is the actual market value of the company. And the very presence of shareholders itself gives a certain incentive to the company to perform at a higher level. In fact, the recent experiences we had with the National Hydropower Corporation and Oil India indicates that after listing, there was a huge increase in market capitalization. 94% in the case of NHPC, 124% in the case of Oil India. The central public sector, so far as central public sector undertakings are concerned, I've been looking at some of them recently, and we have been experimenting with autonomy in management, but I do see problems on both sides. On one side, on the government side, I see excessive interference in the nitty-gritty of administration by administrative ministries. It is something which we need to stop. We are here to lay down the policy, we are here to lay down the strategies. But the nitty-gritty of administration must be left to the boards. And at the same time, on the side of the central public sector undertakings, I also see a reluctance even to exercise delegated powers. Repeatedly, I came across, and last time when I went to Bangalore, one of the chief executives did tell me that they are hesitant to exercise delegated powers. Now, you really cannot have autonomy in management if powers already available with you are not fully utilized. I have now asked the Department of Public Enterprises to work out systems by which exercise of delegated powers by central public sector undertakings becomes part of the evaluation process. I want it to be inbuilt into the categorization of public sector undertakings, because if we have given certain powers, they must be used. My own experience, I have been, as I mentioned, the managing director of the Cooperative Marketing Federation in Kerala. I have been managing director of the Kerala State Civil Supplies Corporation. I have been managing director of the Travancore Titanium Products. I have been managing director of the Spices Trading Corporation. So I have been actually in the real role of a manager. My own experience is that there is a considerable amount of flexibility available with public sector managers to operate. I mean, if you have the ideas and you have the energy and the impulse to carry it forward, generally you do find support to carry those activities forward. In the Government of India, we have taken it one step further, as you know. We have now memoranda of understanding between public sector undertakings and the administrative ministries, which lay down what they will achieve during a particular year and how and what kind of freedom is given by the government. I mean, this is something which we are now thinking in terms of extending to government as such. And and even in the Cabinet Secretariat, we are looking at performance management of departments and ministries in government. We have now a separate performance management wing. Now, so far as Kerala is concerned, I think this is again a logical evolution, because I find from the presentation which Mr. Balakrishnan will be making shortly, that one of the reasons for your success during the last year was the introduction of principles like annual budgeting, evaluation, and careful internal auditing. And it's important, I think, that you could think of going one step forward and go into an MOU system. So far as Government of India is concerned, we will be quite happy to share our own experience in this area with the state government. One more point I think we need to look at is that we are in a dynamic situation. The public sector undertakings are set up under a particular set of assumptions. These assumptions may undergo substantial change, particularly since no political or economic system remains stagnant. It is subject to constant change. Monopoly conditions disappear, comparative cost advantages may vanish. At that point of time, acceptance of change is necessary. Options and alternatives need to be quickly examined, and we need to act very fast before the situation becomes irretrievable. Needless to say, proper analysis and political will and determination will be required. Above all, the exigencies of growth demand a pragmatic approach. In the presentation that Mr. Balakrishnan will make, and I see it right in front of me also, it says, open doors lead to open minds. The crucial point is opening the minds of individuals, the minds of decision makers and of governments, viewing the changing situation in a macro context. In an increasingly globalizing world, there are new doors opening today. There are also, at any point of time, doors that begin to close. We need an open approach, being fully alive to the world economy as it changes and evolves. In this context, I cannot overemphasize the importance of being competitive. Competition, not only amongst enterprises, competition among states in attracting enterprise. Competition in looking at procedures, at rules and regulations, simplifying them. Competition in doing things faster, doing things cheaper. Competition at looking realistically at core strengths. I wish my home state all success in creating a strong, growth-oriented economy based on its strengths. It has already shown what it can do, both in the private sector and the public sector. In the public sector, the performance has considerably improved, and the central government enterprises and the state government enterprises have struck a fruitful partnership. In the private sector, Kerala was one of the first states to generate a huge growth impulse out of tourism, out of Ayurveda, and out of the service industry. I wish this seminar all success, and thank you once again for calling. Thank you.